welcome to this technical domain session as part of the buildingSMART International Standards Summit, Valencia 2024. Thank you for joining. My name is Andre and I will be your moderator today. Today's session is titled Embracing Change, How Should IFC Plan to Embrace LLMs, AI, and Robotics? The speaker for this session is Greg Schleusner, Director of Design Technology at HOK. This session is scheduled to last 90 minutes, including time for questions at the end. But it will be an interactive session as well. The session is being recorded and will be made available in the replay section of the event as soon as possible. Before I hand over to the speaker, I would like to remind you that this is a hybrid event. For online attendees, your microphones will remain muted for the duration of the session. If you wish to make a comment or ask a question, please use the chat box in the control panel. For the attendees here in the room, please keep background noise to a minimum. And if you wish to make a comment or ask a question, please raise your hand and use a microphone. I would also like to bring to your attention that buildingSMART is committed to ensuring that participation in the development of standards is unrestricted and the process for their adoption is transparent, and standards that are developed do not favor any particular provider and are open, non-binding, and accessible to all. Please take note of Antitrust Code of Conduct. Now, I would like to hand over to Greg.
Thanks for joining today. Our sessions are loose. This one is super loose. So this is going to be interactive, but as soon as we get the screen up, one of the thing I wanted to talk about today was based on an experiment I did that wasn't a buildingSMART experiment. It was something that sort of was rolling around and something I do for my J job. You cannot find this little app in ChatGPT. It's just one we tried and I've only used once or twice. But the basic premise of the question I was asking at the time was, well, are LLMs ever going to be good at geometry? And that probably most people, my guess at the time was probably no, given some complexities. But you always need to try these things. And so I'll walk you through the sort of the experiment I did. And this was like, for those of you who don't know, I work for a company called HOK. My job is to figure stuff out. And so this is not more than a few hours of tinkering. But that tinkering got some questions rolling, and we wanted to have this session that starts to poke at this stuff, get feedback from the room. There are people that are doing much more advanced stuff in here. There's some interesting questions that come out of it. And that's the point of this session today. On top of that, we're working on IFC 5, which is not done yet. So something that's not done can be changed. It's the nice part of being a designer versus a contractor. You have infinite freedom until you don't. So we have infinite freedom right now to think through these things, plan for anything that's interesting that we need to plan for. So really when we say it's a wide open question if we should do anything or nothing. I'm scoping it specifically around IFC, not what buildingSMART should do. So yeah, questions thus far? Okay, so this is just ChatGPT. This is basically just I can't remember what they're actually called, but you can name your own agents. Yeah. And all I did was told it that it knows stuff about buildings, and it told it I'm going to use it for doing stacking buildings. Stacking buildings in the parlance I'm talking about here is a vertically based planned building versus a horizontally placed building. Stack a building to say, oh, the first floor has this, second floor has that. Simple enough. So very simple stuff. Can you give me a one-level building? First thing it tries to give you an image. Okay. Then, well, what are some nice text-friendly geometry formats, especially for a 2D problem? I picked SVG. So I quickly, SVG is like text. So is code, so this should not be a surprise to anyone. I will not preview all these, but basically it started giving me results. As I worked through it, I'll show you some examples. So let's say here, at this point, I'm actually I'm talking to it in units. This is an important aspect. I can't use any talking to it. It's probably the best way to say this. I can't use conventional terms like trying to do here. I'm trying to show you a preview. Very hard to understand. You can probably barely see that, but there's a black line on my screen. It's 3 black boxes. Not very useful yet. Okay, well, let's keep. Just like there is the intersection of one of them. Yeah, it's not great thus far. I had the same problem too. I used dark theme, so I'm sure I fixed this. So let's keep going. What I learned though is as long as I told it, so you're not familiar with SVG, it's just XML that draws vectors, and so it has units, but I didn't want to talk to this thing in units. I wanted to talk about it in square feet. So I basically expressed at some point here that when I say 400 units, I'm going to tell you 40,000 square feet. So I'm giving you a factor of 100 that when I say 40,000 square feet, you're going to give me a 400 unit box in a direction. So at some point here, I started to get examples that look that way. It flips around. I swear there's real stuff you'll be able to see in a second here. I'll go quickly to the chase, but at some point I actually started to get something that looked like a building and that I could express in building terms. Also, why did so this is when you get to prepping, but not really prepping to read all your prompts. Here, we'll go to much further. So the point is, I started to go through in much further detail to say, well, there should be certain things inside one another. God, how about we skip to the chase? At some point, I actually start to get it to draw me stuff that has color in it. And you can see it, I can start to tell it, add metadata to it. I can, sort of have it explain what it's trying to do. By some point here, I had to get this stuff thing to fill itself in. There we go. Label what you are. I'm going to show this data in public, so I'm just making stuff up. I told it in the prompt that let me see here. I started to give it an image because that's a sort of an interesting problem, but I was basically describing starting to put sub-bits of data in there.
You gave an image.
Yeah, it didn't work.
Okay.
But this was 4 months ago, this experiment. You can get much better. I'm not showing you everything today because this is a discussion, but yeah, you can get much further. In this example, you can do the same thing by giving it a sketch and start asking questions. You could start to string these concepts together quite quickly. You can imagine how text input is not the only input that, so this was a very bad, a poorly drawn sketch, asking it to interpret it. So if you start to put the things together, I'm talking through today. But at the end, like at this point in time, what I walked away with of this little experiment is that interesting. So if we're thinking about geometry specifically, that the nature of this geometry looks a lot like language, and that should or should not inform work we're going to do in the future when it comes to geometry formats, because what you will find is if you try to get it to do binary data, there are people working on binary versions of this sort of approach, but you can't chat with the binary data. But the realization of coming away from this is like that a very simple representation, and I'll just go all the way to the end to get the last one, that satisfied a small data requirement, like just describe one piece of a whole in the matter of a 2-hour conversation with no fine tuning, no nothing. I could teach it how a non-expert could talk to geometry directly without an intermediary tool. So the reason to have this discussion is, what does this mean for a standards body that is always at the, it's called mercy sometimes, but that wants to make standard data, and here's a tool that can potentially make standard data without a piece of software. So that's the start. I have more experiments I could talk about looking at different things. Not all of this is perfect. Everybody is aware of the code advances. Reactions from the room. And again, this is a exploratory session. I don't have a clear opinion on this means anything or not. You know, how is this scalable or not? I do not know.
I'll start.
I mean, I guess my first thought is that's a pretty picture, right?
Yep.
But I wonder how well it would do if you said, now give this to me in IFC, for example.
Oh, it would do horribly.
Right. It would make up.
The exploration here is, well, this is a very simple geometry format for a very simple part of a whole problem.
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah.
So I think that's all you can take away with it. IFC, yeah, if you try to give ChatGPT IFC, it just barfs.
Right.
Hello. I have something to say regarding this, the SVG. I have played around previously with adding IFC in ChatGPT Plus and trying to do a count, let's say, of classes, how many IFC columns, or to add properties. What I found, if you try to do this, its first instinct is to go with the code interpreter to do the coding on its own temporary virtual environment. And its first instinct is to go and import IFC OpenShell. Then it finds out I do not have access to IFC OpenShell, and it looks at the IFC on a text level, like at the notepad. And it could do, in certain scenarios, certain things, count the classes. But in order to achieve this more successfully, let's say, I had to give it custom instructions to create a custom ChatGPT, what you showed first. I was also able to modify attributes of elements in the IFC. Let's say I told it to name all the IFC columns, IFC column ChatGPT, underline 1, 2, whatever, and it did that. It also removed geometry, remove all the classes on a specific building story, and it worked. Unfortunately, it's doing this on a notepad, a text basis. What would be interesting to see if you could implement a library like IFC OpenShell within the virtual environment that ChatGPT is creating. And then, in theory, it should be able to do the modification much more accurately and predictable, let's say. Because if you ask it to generate IFC OpenShell code and you run it in VS Code, after some tinkering, it works.
Yeah.
So theoretically, if it would have access in the virtual created environment to that specific library, it should, in theory, work.
Yeah, and so this is an interesting thing. Like, certainly, a lot of people are going down the path of using ChatGPT for code generation, and I think that works well. It works great, and I actually used it because I tried to do an alignment. Alignments are complex, and it had to default at some point to giving me code. I think there's a interesting set of discussions to say that the having to default to code is harder than just interacting with the data your example said before. So ChatGPT is a very generic tool. You know, what's happening in the world is people are making LLMs, they're good at math, which is ChatGPT is not good at math, but being good at math is actually potentially being good at geometry in a way. So I think what software libraries are available for ChatGPT or other LLMs to work with is interesting, but at the same time, is there something correct in thinking that, well, we should plan for a future, in some way, shape, or form, that this is something people want to do, interact with the data directly versus interacting it through tooling? Again, it's a question. I don't know if it's a good question. Well, It's an interesting question. I don't know if it's a useful question for us, but we're so early in setting the firm rules for what IFC 5 looks like. It's the right question to have, or discussion to have at least. So there's other hands back there, I think.
Yeah, so that was partly addressed with the previous question. If we could use ChatGPT to parse the existing IFC logs, that was somehow said. But I understand that the question is a bit, just to open the discussion, but do we identify the current situation as a problem? That we do, well, we could call ChatGPT on some, or any other LLM on some APIs in an ultimate platform, and then we could have our libraries to parse or to author IFC logs.
Yeah. So
why is it a problem? Do you see this a problem from architectural perspective, or?
it's an interesting one. So I've mentioned this before. I'm an architect, building architect by training. I tried to learn software development my whole life. I can't. It doesn't take. But I build a lot of tools now in Python, right? Because ChatGPT exists. The hardest part of this whole thing now is knowing how to talk to these things and setting up a Python environment that doesn't break all the time. So it's still a developer experience. I think this conversation probably is not a developer experience when what we're having here, right? Is I'm a user wanting to do something. Is that potentially a better experience if I don't need a quote unquote software for pieces of things? Maybe geometry should be off the table for our discussion like that. Maybe all this does is decides that we should enable both binary and non-binary representation. So, updating the properties is actually something someone can do. But it also speaks to the fact that you're editing data, which right now, buildingSMART doesn't have the facilities to really sort of look at IFC as being an editable format. But certainly this is what we're thinking about in IFC 5, that you can update components outside of tools. I can't imagine this room has no opinions on any of this stuff.
Yeah, well, when I said architecture, I meant system architecture, not architecture as discipline or in AEC.
You replace, so the next thing I'll show you is exactly where this falls apart right now is I am not a infrastructure designer. I don't know how it works. So I asked it to describe, ChatGPT describe, an infrastructure alignment, how it works, how the horizontal track gauges and all this stuff worked. Then it gave me the sort of European standards. Then I asked it, the hardest thing for me to understand in the alignment conversation is the business rules versus geometric discussion. So I asked it, well, can you describe one of these? Of course, it's took a while to figure it out, but you start to get the descriptions, and a lot of the stuff in that discussion is actually rule based. It's less geometry. So it's interesting that, again, interesting, maybe not useful, that is this a interface to creating data, and we still have to default to tooling. Eventually I got to the point where, I try to force it to give me a sample data set. It will actually make, like in this case, I wanted a 3D format instead of a 2D one. So I picked DXF. It will make DXF, cleaner DXF than any library will make because it has all the other stuff that all the libraries add on top. But not really all that great. But yeah, the point of this discussion is there anything we should do, think about, or we should just let this develop, and anything we do is probably going to be positively benefited by this. Here, up front.
Sorry, I'm not sure of understanding the question. Generative AI is here as a tool and will help us. We cannot trust in everything of the result. We have to be testing it. And in the general ChatGPT, when you go deeper into the results, it has success in 40% or less. So you need to go into deeper solutions.
Yeah, so I'm using a very generic tool. buildingSMART could actually train an LLM that really understands IFC 5 really well,
Yes.
right? We could fine tune a small model that just like other tools do math well, buildingSMART can make one that understands IFC very well. So yeah, still have to check things, still have to be validated, certainly, but we have an evolving process of continuous validation. So, like, do you envision a world that IFC should like embrace direct update and editing?
Yeah, for sure. Everybody, not only IFC, everybody.
Yeah,
that's for sure. And in about what we are talking about design, we don't find generative AI solves except visualization, things like that. But machine learning, it works for structural. There are several doctoral essays that proves that it designs better without designing calculation than traditional structural for buildings.
So through a surrogate approach, basically.
Yes.
Yeah, pre-training or pre-calculating training and machine learning model to understand how to adapt to the parameters and then applying them instantly. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Versus a language model, which is a generative approach. Yeah. Okay. There's something in the back.
Hi, I haven't checked myself. What I can assume is that ChatGPT would be good in following some patterns, using huge data or a scheme. So would it be an idea to generate test instructions from this? Is that something which could be useful to try? Because I can imagine it takes a lot of time to make some, and maybe you can generate lots of them and then test it and see what happens to check if the software has implemented the IC scheme correctly.
I'm actually poorly suited to answer that. So, would it be good should we focus on making test cases for enabling checking of the possible quality of the schema, or quality of the results software tools make today?
Yes. I mean,
that's a good use case. I mean, I guess what's on my mind, right, is exactly like what are the workflows that we even would consider for this? I mean, I don't think anyone's thinking that you're going to type in, can you design a 30-story hospital for me, please? But what is a reasonable workflow from the room, not from me, that you might think that you would get from this in the next 5 years?
Yeah, and this starts to speak of why I chose this section example. So what we're thinking about in IFC5 is a much more modular data set with different components and different representations. So we do not have anything close to what I showed in the first example, which is a building stack, which is roughly some geometry that represents the stories in the building and a space allocation for each one. Well, if the whole thing is exceedingly hard, and that's actually not how anyone works. Like, no one designs every part of everything at the same time. Right? No software, no design process, no construction process works that way. Well, if the interaction modes are much more targeted, then what I showed potentially is a use case that says, oh, I can start making my IFC data by doing a stack process. And then somebody could come back with a other simple process that says, well, I can have the floor plan layout representation of that stack. And then once I have that, I have levels, I have curves for the wall locations. I could then instantiate geometry on top. It actually makes for or at least describes a layer cake development of data on top. That's more even layer cakey than we've ever described in IFC. Like, you could actually build it up in smaller pieces and it's sort of thought as a whole. It's an option. So this is a weird thing to talk about because, yes, no one would use an LLM to make me a design. Anybody that's tried will get crap, right? But if we're actually thinking about supporting different modes of interaction, maybe we embrace I don't know, small workflows within a whole, maybe is the word to say it. I don't know exactly what that means. Here.
Yeah, so about the idea of using the AI to help in the design process, I can imagine the case for the infrastructure, especially the when you have only the alignment in the IFC, and if it is editable, and or there is a workflow that allows to edit that, you could use AI to distribute elements on some repetitive or based on some rules, like sleepers. They should have the same distances, maybe at some part of the track. And for that, AI maybe would be helpful. The question is, would buildingSMART deliver that workflow, or maybe not necessarily? That's pretty open, but I see potential there.
Yeah, I think what we have to consider is maybe all this results in is we keep a text format around, not just a binary format, so this stuff can happen, and that's the only thing buildingSMART needs to do. That could be the net result of this conversation, or it could be that we intentionally look for legibility, whatever that means, as be part of the design goal of the representations of IFC. Maybe that's it.
But I think that's right. Like when you think about designing 95, right? What are the things that we want to make easy for ChatGPT to pick up on for specific high-end workflows, right? So if repetitive placement along an alignment is a high-end workflow, then we want to make sure that profiles are easy to generate, right? And it's easy to location against an alignment. So that influences what IFC5 looks like. Whereas we don't need to worry about, again, a full cluster or whatever else. So I think that is very instructive. Like, what are the building blocks, right? And you're right. Text is the baseline. Right? A profile becomes a building block. An alignment becomes a building block. What are the other building blocks that would get us to high-end workflows?
Mike's back there.
So that was indeed my question. Are we talking about geometry being the baseline for the rest? Or are we talking about geometry being one of the lists of one of the items in the list of components? Because to me, topology could be represented in other ways than geometry as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the reason I started with geometry is I have most of my problems are geometry problems. So that's where I started. And it's the one that I think most people think is the furthest, it's the most illogical one to start with, right? Because why the hell would ChatGPT or any of these things be good at geometry? But I think we'll find there's a real open, we should raise hands. How many of you think that somebody can make a ChatGPT or a GPT or a large language geometry kernel in the next 3 years? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh, we got some, well, some maybe it's inside 8. So there's not let's say 10%.
That's a working group right there.
Yeah. It's an unknown, but if you can be good at math, like we said before, you can probably be good at geometry.
No, but then the application. So let's say we succeed to do that. Wouldn't that become some sort of geometry at the front end, actually? Like what happens with with most of the design authoring tools, it looks like you're drawing a line, but in the back end, it's not understanding geometry. Geometry is what is rendered for you.
Or it could be that interoperability is not export, it's interpretation. Reinterpretation, because these things are really good at translation. And the design tools do whatever they want. I'm not saying this is right. I'm just saying this is I can speak in English and get Italian. Why can't I talk geometry A and get geometry B? Right? Again, I think it's an interesting place we should think about if we're just at least planning for that we have modules that are actually sort of the core of a lot of the workflows that we should make supportive of this kind of engagement, to totally sort of look around. We have IFC is an archive format in and how to use it as an archive format. Well, what is, sort of a lot of the problems with having an archive format without an archive tool is asking some of these questions. Well, is that the solution? Again, I think they're very interesting questions. The fact that so many people, like you said that the geometry, like it maybe not 10%, maybe 7%, you could have a geometry kernel in the next couple of years that's just text-based. I think is an interesting thing. So, clarifies. buildingSMART is a standards organization. We're not going to build tools necessarily. Maybe we should be convinced to make a language model. So the main discussion here is what we should do in IFC to support these kind of developments. But are there things we shouldn't do?
Do we have any manifest besides interoperability to look at to validate that mission?
What we do as a technical room is driven by the business goals of the standards organization, and our standards organization has not been a software organization.
Now, I understand, but as buildingSMART, as an entity, which is always repeating this message of interoperability, are we talking about this shift or drift in the focus, or is it the wrong interpretation of mine?
This is not a making decisions meeting. This is a coming up with decisions to make meeting.
Just discussing perspective.
Yeah, perfect.
So just thinking out loud. We're talking about IFC 5 as an example, and there will be an API. So the question is more, should we allow plain text geometry, understandable, to be processed through that API? Because then it doesn't really matter how we represent it at the other end of that API. It's just a thought from my side.
Yeah. No, that is a perfectly valid response to that point. You have an API that can take the binary format and give it to you as in plain text, and you can give it back in plain text and get binary back. Yeah, done. Solved.
That's really
Well, IFC doesn't have a binary format right now, but binary formats are much more speedy to pass around. They're much more portable, all kinds of other things. So
I was looking at an image of this guy's computer right here, and I realized that there's another issue here for AI, right?
if we get the mic,
Yeah.
sorry.
I mean, we know AI right now creates images just fine, right? That was the one image I had on my presentation, AI generated. It has to have AI in there somewhere. But it can't really, if you ask it, okay, how did you create this, right? It has no idea.
Can I come?
Yes, please.
So I recently listened to a podcast where Microsoft people, before GPT-4 was released, they were testing it, and they were giving it tasks that they thought that it wouldn't have been trained for. So there was one guy thought if ChatGPT can draw, and he asked I have this text here, maybe I could find it. It was, he asked ChatGPT to create a program code that would draw a unicorn. And I think this is the unicorn. It's a simple, very simple unicorn. So it created a program code that drew a unicorn. And then next day, they changed the program code so that in the original picture, it was going to the right, and they turned it to go to the left, and they removed the horn from the top of its head and said that here is a unicorn. Can you draw the horn on its head? And it did it. So
Yeah.
it's quite amazing.
Well, yeah. So, but is this like on how? What's the? Are you asking the editing question? Are you editing the checking question?
Well, I was actually worried about, I was thinking about generative design, right? You have generative design, you get these crazy shapes, right? Which are impossible to have in any simple geometry other than a gazillion advanced B-reps. So I was worried that maybe you could get some nice advanced geometry, but I created the sphere by creating 5,000 extrusions all at different angles, right? And now it looks like a sphere, right?
This is how like Gaussian splatting works. It's a bunch of balls in space that like look to your eye like stuff.
Right. So even if it could display something nice, there's no guarantee that you could actually use it as a building block for anything. That's something we'd have to think about. So there's a nice unicorn, though.
Totally. I'm on the creation of data side and probably on the editing side. Should we be doing anything on the protection side? Certainly the things that we're going to be doing in IFC 5 to help with identifiability, traceability, these things will allow for more security on top of, or validation. Not validation in the quality of the data, but like this is the thing that the design engineer gave to the contractor at a certain date and time, and it's that one, right? That's being included in the work for IFC 5. But is there anything else we need to do to protect data in these things? I don't know. Probably not anything we can do because it's just a data format. It's just buildingSMART. Maybe the only thing we can do is provide best practices. We designed IFC 5 to be modular. Don't share everything all the time if you don't want to. It's the best we can probably do. I mean, the point of this is to get people starting to think about this. It is surprising to most people that, like, just again, I am not showing you this stuff I'm doing today because that stuff is much cooler than this. This is 2 hours of work. It's work in progress, but this was an experiment that lasted 2 hours. So you should all go home and try these things. And then the next time we have this conversation, you can say, oh shit, or it sucks. But yeah, because I think there's a lot of, even on the design side of this question, a lot of people are looking at training traditional machine learning models to do design problems. The token rate of hardware is flying. So yes, ChatGPT is super slow, but the new hardware that's coming out that can do 1,000 tokens a second is as fast as code. So maybe these directions will work. So there's a question in the back.
Thank you. Sorry I didn't listen to the whole discussion, but I can give you my point of view, which is something that I have been personally experimenting a lot on the use of GPT APIs. In fact, next week there is a conference, AI in AAC in Finland, and I will be bringing the results of such research. There are a lot of other companies involved, Autodesk, Trimble representatives, and so on. A bit disappointed that I will be the only one talking about OpenBIM, actually. But anyway, from what I have seen from your example, we have been very successful by following some different ways that you showed. First thing, someone was talking about editing columns and so on. The problem is that at some point, if you only rely on text when you talk with the ChatGPT, sooner or later it will start hallucinating, which is a problem of how transformers are working, so how GPT is built at the moment. So that leads to some results in the beginning, but then we had to follow another path. The second one, of course, is to make it write the code, because if you then you can check the code and see that it is actually working more or less properly. But again, this leads to better results, but still not probably the way to go at the moment. Maybe in 2 to 5 years it will be so good that it will be able to understand that actually write and edit IFC models. But I think that at the point it will be so smart that there will be other kind of problems. Anyway, what we have been most successful to do right now is to use its ability to do API calling, which is very good, very good at. And by the way, before I move to the API calling, also doing fine tuning will yield to you better results, but only to some extent, because at some point it will hallucinate again. And the alignment example is a very cool one, because we have done something similar. Okay, I see. Maybe your example is what you have done next. Cool.
I'm only bringing this up because this is where today
okay.
you have to get to. I didn't write any of this code, obviously.
Okay, you asked to write the code, but then when you do your prompting with the text, then it will call this API, which then will do the stuff that you need to do. And this is exactly what we have done. So at the moment, this is the best thing that we are able to do. We are able to create bridges from speech, not because GPT is creating the bridges, but because it is interpreting the user request and saying, okay, similar to what you have shown before for the alignment, which was returning the description, it will also call the API to say, okay, the user wants this straight line, then there is a curve counterclockwise with a certain radius and so on. And then you will provide the API to actually write the IFC file or whatever you want and you need to. So at the moment, this is the most successful thing that we have done, and we had quite some success with this approach. And so yeah, as you I think you will show in your next examples, he will give you the correct parameters from the APIs that you have coded or it has coded in some previous prompt, and it will give you the correct IFC model. Not because it knows how to write the IFC model, but because you know how to create it, and it will call the right APIs also in sequence. And so with regards to the question, I think what we can do to make IFC file better to these regards, I think that more or less it is already, we are already on the right path, because it will be more modular than the previous versions, the IFC, which already helps a lot. And of course it will be API friendly, which is what actually ChatGPT, it's one of the things that ChatGPT excels at. So I definitely agree with the next of your examples that I have seen on the screen. So this is my findings so far.
Yeah. So my example, which setting up APIs and like getting a fast API server is a pain in the ass, so I don't ever go that far. But basically what you're describing is a function calling approach, where the language model is really the interpreter, but you're not letting it guess. You're calling functions that know how to do things. And I think this goes back to sort of Angel's point that, well, we should make sure you can have, definitive functions as an example of like what the modules are that you would want to be able to create, whether you're using a language model or a encode function to do the same thing. Like, don't make it a million bits of data that you have to assemble. You can just make it. I think that speaks to the way you're using it today. Okay. Yeah. So the example, like, eventually, I was having it this one. It eventually. I can't remember how I got to here, but I said, okay, start making me DXF data. That was where I started here. And then finally I said, okay, you suck at this. You don't know how to do math. Make me the Python code to make me the DXF data. And I went back and forth. And the thing I could never get it to do was figure out how to put an endpoint of the circle together. This endpoint of a circle that was an origin-based circle. Of course, the math is hard. So, it's always good to do the experiments. Go ahead.
So maybe similarly to how IDS is having some rules to check the model, buildingSMART could develop a identify first the most used model manipulation functions that the AI could use later. That would be maybe a way. So not really giving the tools to manipulate the model, because this is something that people develop themselves, or the software does, but defining the functions that are making the process easier.
Should we track, should we embed in the data its provenance that way? I was made by this kind of function. Because otherwise, how would you know?
Yeah, that's a good question.
If I resolve to a set of values, but I don't know what method was to resolve to it. Yes, we could always check it's right, but we are consistent.
Yeah.
But we wouldn't know how.
Yeah, knowing the method could be useful. I agree.
From last year, later last year, I have to do a stupid test because I checking a lot of IFC 4.3 documentation. So what I did in ChatGPT 4 with the model API model, I gave the link of the development GitHub, and particularly the index page of all those classic IFC words and case, all those names. And I started to ask him to ask ChatGPT to give me some feedback explanation. So sometimes it's quite good, but sometimes it gives me some invention. Some class don't exist still in IFC. So in my opinion, maybe I don't know. buildingSMART as a real set work and real set as a standard body. We don't look towards direction as tooling stuff, but maybe we can provide more knowledge. Knowledge based in the engineering field, the relation from different space hierarchy. So it's just my personal opinion. I'm not expert for the geometry part, but if we can provide more information, like in BSDD data dictionary, and the more information in some description and example in documentation sheets, maybe one day feed all of those markdown files, images to a stronger model. It will be for clearing some information. Maybe it will be help.
Yeah.
So that.
Thank you. Now, if you haven't tried what I just did here, as I went and looked how many people had made GPTs that know something about IFC, I mean, clearly this is not, I'm not the only one with this idea, and other people in the room definitely are. But I think the other place to look is what, I'm not certain what that 10 plus means. Maybe that's the number of installs. Yeah, what
the number of uses of other users.
Does anybody know?
So we use it at least 10 times.
Yeah.
But other people, not the creator.
Correct. Yeah. But you get the point. Like, we have such a complex data format. You need a tool like this. That's one. But flip side is, well, if you have a data tool that can talk to these systems, it makes it much simpler for people. Again, I think I got, and I hope you guys got things that you're going to try to experiment with as you go forward, because I think that's the most important part. Is it's moving so fast. There's no way we can make any decisions. We're going to do the things that we know we're going to do. It's just whether or not, as we progress through this, certain things aren't worth all the time that they would have been as things change. And maybe as a standards body, we should not be that reactive. We should be, large language models are a fad. We should just continue. Right here.
Yes, I'm sorry, I don't have a technical background, but I'm just having some thoughts. I mean, ChatGPT was trained on using the internet, and that's how I learned structuring a sentence. And 10 years ago, that's magic. And then it's been looking at images and videos on the internet and using GitHub to structure code. That's also amazing. But I was thinking about its access to good IFC files. And I'm thinking that many people who owning those IFC files are kind of protected with those. So it maybe could be an idea to think of some ways to push people to share those IFC files and maybe make them kind of safe for sharing, something like that.
Well, so there's two ways to think about this. There's just having to share the data, and then is there something in the data that we want to enable to share without having to share the raw values? Right?
Exactly.
Like, is there a summary format of IFC that actually can tell you something that is good as a, what's the word for it? What functions were used, what classes were used, but it itself is not the raw data that most of the time wants to be protected. But is this the right way to think about this problem? Is there much to get out of that? I don't know. Okay. Yeah, if we were experimenting, I asked it to help me start to build up my own 3D format that was based in text. And of course, the dumbest formats are very simple. Points and lines and so forth. And the reason, one quick one, the reason I did this is as you go through this, going directly to chat like GLTF as an example, hard. Going from this invented format, which probably looks like some sort of OBJ or something like that, to another more complex format, simpler. So the idea that you can use simple formats to get to more complex things is an interesting thing to learn as well. Bjorn.
Yeah, so I think most of the current BIM authoring tools, the ones that creates IFC, are experimenting or soon to be released or have released something where you can use plain language to help and do design stuff. And the reason why we not do that directly on IFC is because you want plans, your sections, and all of that to be updated simultaneously as you do changes, so the bill of quantities, whatever. But picking up on that, how to train these things by providing models. Just to add to that, if you also can provide all BCF issues to the same designs, then maybe there's something there that could be useful in terms of avoiding issues further, and maybe also help creating models or parts of models, for example.
Well, so you yesterday said you want all changes, right? And if you had all changes, if you had A and B, you would know where A was, and in the B condition, it's changed to B, right? So back to this question about sharing data, it's possible that you don't actually have to share the actual data. You just have to share the metadata about the change history, right? Oh, ducts were moved later in the project. They were repositioned to be below or above pipes. Pipes were, all these sort of things. So that it's an interesting question. If you have all the history, do you ever have to share the specifics? Or is that something that would be useful to, clients or whoever, customers of buildingSMART? I don't know. But again, I appreciate the time. I think we can wrap it if there's nothing else. But it would be good for you to all start to push on this topic in your own different ways. Some of you definitely are. I would encourage you that don't think you're technical to try to do these things, because again, I make tools. I don't have to. I can make prototypes now. I can't make tools. But that's what half of figuring some of these things out are failed experiments. So I would, push everybody to do that. Some of you are working on much bigger data sets, bigger, harder problems. If we want to do a very much focused ML AI session in, where are we going next? Marrakesh. we should think about it. If people want to volunteer for that, typically the technical room has been working very much in IFC 5, but this is influencing IFC 5. But if we think there's enough momentum there, we should plan for that as well. Any last questions? I appreciate no one fell asleep, I don't think. Thank you all.